So hi, everybody.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hello.
Shalom. We're happy
Shalom.
to be back.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm here also with you. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 questions, five questions that I watched again the presentation from yesterday, and I just wrote down 5 questions. I don't think it will take long. They're easy. I just thought, I can ask you. So my first question is why at some point I think Kim, you said that a Passover sometimes may fall on the second month. Did I understand wrong, or this can actually happen?
There's a statute requirement. Well, it is in Numbers, and in the second year in the wilderness, Yahuwah had told Moses for the people to keep the Passover in that first month. But there were some men who said, why are we prevented from keeping that Passover? Because we've been defiled by an unclean body. And Moses said, let me go and inquire of Yahuwah. And he did. And then the answer came forth to him from Yahuwah. And it says in Numbers 9, in verse 6, but there were men who were defiled for a being of a man, so that they were not able to perform the Pesach on that day, the 14th day of the first month. So they came before Moshe and Aharon that day, and those men said to him, we are defiled for the being of a man. Why are we withheld from bringing near the offering of Yahuwah at its appointed time among the children of Yasharel? And Moshe said to them, wait, let me hear what Yahuwah commands concerning you. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Yasharel, saying, when any male of you or your generation is unclean or a being, or is far away on a journey, he shall still perform the Pesach of Yahuwah on the 14th day of the second month. Between the evenings, they perform it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They eat it. They do not leave any of it until morning, and they do not break a bone of it. According to all the laws of the Pesach, they perform it. But the man who is clean and is not on a journey and has failed to perform the Pesach in the first month on the 14th day, that same being shall be cut off from among his people, because he did not bring the offering of Yahuwah at its appointed time. That man bears his sin.
Okay.
So
that means that in that occasion, then the unleavened bread, the 7 days for the unleavened bread and wave sheaf would happen on the second month also.
So the stipulation is just for Passover, just for the Passover. There wouldn't be the stipulation of the 7 days of unleavened bread or wave sheaf.
Okay.
You would miss out on wave sheaf, Charlene.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, the reason for that is, Maria, because if you have another placement of wave sheaf, then that adjusts the count, the 50-day Omer count. So no, so Kim is right. There is another example in the scriptures where a second Passover was kept later on, many years later on, but only the Passover, not the unleavened bread and not the wave sheaf, because the wave sheaf count has already started back in the first month. So it's just the Passover. And a lot of people don't understand that. Also, a lot of people say for this Joshua study that we're doing right now, that it was a Passover in the second month, but there is no 14th day on a Shabbat in the second month. Not in this, not the way that it's written in Joshua 5:11 with that Shabbat being the H7676. Remember, that's the weekly
Yeah,
Shabbat.
yeah.
And then also comparing with the Zadok calendar, there is no 14th day on a Shabbat in the second month of the Zadok calendar, but you do find a 14th day on a Shabbat in the third month, but there was not a Passover in the third month.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
I understand. Okay. And can we again go over it one more time and explain to me why the spies started counting their 3 days on the evening and not in the morning like the rest of Israel?
Did you want me to answer, Kim?
Honey?
That's why we said that the count in Joshua, those 3 counts, there's 3 different ones, and they're all counting 3
Mhm.
days. It is so important to know where you start the count. So Rahab told them to not leave until it was dark. And she said, go to the mountains for 3 days. So when they left, when it was dark, that's where the count started. So you start your count from when they left at night, at dark, and they're going to be there for 3 days. Now, why is that important? Because when we get to Yahusha and the Messianic prophecy of his 3 days and 3 nights, that he will be taken away from mankind, you have to know when to start that count. Now, some of them feel that you start that count when he was put into the tomb, but we don't know the exact time. But we do know he has told us when at the 9th hour or 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Roman time, he said, it is finished. And then he hung his head and he laid down his life. That's where the count starts for the 3 days and 3 nights. Now, the time that they put him into the tomb and closed it up, we have an approximate time for that, not an exact time, but there is another timeline of about 3 days and 3 nights, not 3 days and 3 nights, but about. And that's another whole study. And that timeline from putting him into the tomb when they closed it up, about 3 days and 3 nights later is when Mary met him in the garden. And that's another whole study. And that all talks about the 12-hour offset. That's something totally different. But if we don't know how to count, then we can have all kinds of different understandings. Some people say, well, he was in the grave before sunset, around 5 o'clock, and they'll start their count there. A count for timelines, another whole big study, is that there needs to be a speaking voice that starts the timeline and a speaking voice that ends the timeline. There's lots of timelines in Daniel and Revelation, but this timeline of 3 days and 3 nights is the most important messianic timeline in the scriptures because it points to the true Messiah, not a false one. So that's why the count. We just found it amazing that Joshua has 3 examples of counting to 3. And we know what we went through in trying to figure out this count to 3 with the deliverance from Egypt, leaving those 3 days and 3 nights to get to the wilderness. So even though it sounds silly that we have to know how to count to 3, there's a little bit more involved to it. Does that help a little bit?
Yes. So you're saying that when we say 3 days, count 3 days, we start the count from the time that someone said 3 days. Count now 3 days. It could have been morning, it could have been afternoon, it could have been evening or night, doesn't matter. We start counting 3 24-hour periods from that moment.
And we do the same today. If you're talking to a friend at noon and you say, let's meet for lunch in 3 days, you start your count there at noon, right? You don't start your count in the morning because you're going to meet them for lunch in 3 days. So we do the same thing here all the time. But when it comes to the scriptures, we kind of forget some of those just basic rules, right? So it's really important to watch the context. That's why we're saying watch the content and the context and be aware. Lots of people think just you have to start the count in the morning at dawn. No.
Yes, yes, because some people understand when it says days, it means the biblical, day from creation, which means from dawn to dawn,
Mm-hmm,
and not the
Mhm.
24-hour period, no matter when it starts.
mm-hmm.
That's why I'm asking
Uh,
for clarification.
Yes, and the same thing right here with this getting together today. Yesterday we got together at a certain time, and we said we will get together today at the same time. So we're counting from where we got together, not from the dawn, where we get together. A really important concept. It makes a lot of difference, especially when you get to the Messiah. And the whole thing about the scriptures is to reveal who the true Messiah is. Who is the true one? That's the whole point of the scriptures. Good questions.
Mm. I don't know. Just please give me a moment because my letters are too small now and I can't read them. Okay, yeah, I have another question here about the wave shift. I asked you yesterday whether they were eating old corn or new corn. You told me it's old corn because the new corn is not ready yet. I was curious about wave shift is very important because we connected with our Messiah offering himself as first fruit, wave shift after his resurrection. And I was wondering what's the significance? I mean, when our Father told us to obey, obey is not the right word. I'm looking here. Anyway, to do this offering of wave shift. How do you understand it? What's the logic behind it? Why it needs to be a grain that it's not fully ripe yet? Why is it important to offer a grain that it has just started its procedure to become, ripe? Because we can eat it. It's a grain that it's not useful yet while we offer it on wave shift. And I was wondering what's the connection with our Messiah? If he's the first grain that is not ripe yet, but it has just. I don't know whether I'm expressing myself. I'm making myself understood.
Yes, you
Why?
are. One of the connections there is Yahusha likened himself to a grain of wheat, and him being about 30 years old when he started his ministry was very young, very, very young. And that falls right in line with the young wheat that is greening, that has not fully matured. Yeah, I can say has not fully matured yet.
Yes, it's not ready for consumption yet. It's not. Yes. It hasn't fulfilled its course yet.
Yes,
that's what I mean.
And Yahusha had not fully completed his fulfillment, if you will, on this earth. That will be fulfilled later on when he comes back to gather his people. That will be the complete fulfillment of his wheat, if you will. It will be the ripening stage, if you will, of the wheat. That's when everything will have matured. So that's kind of a link between the green wheat and the wave sheaf.
Okay, that's the allegory there. Okay, yes, I understand.
Yeah, and also not only that, but he was the first one to resurrect. He was the first. And then he had others, that were resurrected with him. That was his offering that he took. He had to bring an offering as well. So he also brought resurrected wave sheaf offering as his gift. This is what has happened because his resurrection was so powerful that graves were opened and many were resurrected and witnessed that he had been risen. They went into the city and witnessed while he was presenting the wave sheaf, and then all big studies, right? But when he was done, he came back and he had met that group of women that came to the tomb after the sun had risen. Mary wasn't there anymore, but he had met them. And remember, Kim said that they touched
Yes.
him. They
Yes.
came to worship him and touch him. And of course, he made him an appearance all over the place on that day. But he was the very first
Like-
cutting.
Yeah, I understand. So it's a sign, let's say, a sign for the first resurrection, which was, Yeshua's resurrection, and then there is a second resurrection, and that's the ripening of, that's the end of his. That's when he's fulfilling his purpose, when he's resurrecting the rest of the saints. Okay, yeah.
Yes, I think you
understand.
could say that.
Right. And
Good
lastly,
questions.
thank you. And lastly, I'm wondering, do we know exactly how long the Israelites were in the wilderness? Do we know exactly for how long, or it's an approximation?
I believe it's 42 years when it all works out from the time that they left Egypt, 42 years.
So we know exactly for the length of the period they were wandering.
Well, they came out at Passover and they crossed over into Canaan at Passover. So it's pretty
Okay.
exact.
So
And the
that
other
means
thing-
that we can, I'm sorry, finish, Charlene, sorry.
Also, another big study, Genesis 15, where Yahuwah was making that covenant with Abraham when he had the 5 sacrifices. He, cut those 5 sacrifices and laid them open, and there was a covenant where the burning lamp and the smoking furnace walked through. That was a covenant, and that was attached to a 400-year prophecy that in 400 years that Abraham's descendants would come out of bondage. And when you work that out, it is exactly, that was 400 years when they came out. It is exactly 400 years before from that prophecy. Yes, Tim.
What Charlene is talking about right now, the word that you're going to see in this presentation today, etzem, is applied to that exact day that they come out of Mitzrayim. You're going to see this word etzem explained today. Very, very important word. It's the bone structure of our salvation.
Okay. I'm asking that because I was wondering if we know exactly for how long they were out in the wilderness, whether we could actually count all the years. And if we count the years, 360 days, whether we would arrive on the same conclusion when was the first day of the year, the new year that Joshua was about to enter, to cross the Jordan River and enter Canaan. Whether we can do, if it's 42 years and we know, can we count the days since we know exactly what date and day it was when the Israelites came out of Egypt? Can we count the years and find that after 42 years, Passover was the 14th Sabbath? Is that possible to do?
It's a lot of work, but I think it's possible. It's a lot of work.
Okay.
Yes, it's a lot of work just to count a few years, not alone 42. But it could be done. We haven't done that. But the thing is,
But it's possible.
The wonderful thing is that timelines are so exact. Yahuwah is not a day early and he's not a day late. And that's what we're finding, that everything that he's got in the scriptures about time and calendar and timelines. And that's why you see so much calendar language all through the scriptures. And when he says it's the first day of the first month of the new year, that's exactly what it is. It's not a day early and not a day late. He doesn't know any haste and no delay. It's all worked out. And we can trust those timelines. If we can't trust those timelines, Maria, then the timelines that are still going to run in the future that we are finding in Daniel 12, there's 3 timelines there, and there's lots of timelines in Revelation. If we can't trust those timelines, we don't have anything. We don't have a roadmap that's got our directions on it. So those timelines are for Yah's people that want to be in step with him, and he will show them all along the way. There's patterns all along the way as well, and those patterns repeat, and the timelines are accurate. That's how you can know. So this 3 days and 3 nights is really an important one. That's the really important one. And just as a little side note, in Daniel chapter 4 is where you find all of the instructions on how to work with timelines. There has to be a speaking voice that starts them, and the whole timeline has to run, the whole thing, and then there's a voice that stops the timeline. So some people like to say, well, the timelines are shortened. Tim, can you find that verse in Matthew 24 where it says that the tribulation is shortened? Lots of people like to say the timelines are shortened, but when you look at the context, it's the tribulation of Yahuwah's people within that timeline. It's the tribulation that is shortened. Timelines cannot get shortened. When Yahuwah says it's 1260 days, it will be 1260 days. And so go ahead, Tim.
Matthew 24, verse 22. And if those days were not shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the sake of the chosen ones, those days shall be shortened. And again, as Charlene said, timelines are not shortened. Yahuwah has spoken those timelines of the future, and they are as solid as if they had already happened.
Mm-hmm. And Tim has a second application as well. Tim, do you want to give her the second application about the shortening? Because lots of the prophecies will have a second application as well. You know what I'm talking about, right, Tim?
That's the 365-day year going back to 360. All prophecy is written in 30-day months, and that equals out to 360-day years. Yahuwah has said that these prophecies, the 3.5 years, the 42 months, and the 1260 days, that is the organization that the timelines of Revelation 12 will happen in. If you have a year with 365 days or 364 days, Enoch, Zadok, Qumran, you will have too many days. And the prophecy will not be able to happen or function or be fulfilled because there will be too many days. Yahuwah has spoken how many days will be there. That is what will happen. So with Enoch, when we go back to the 360-day year, and Enoch has this mathematically flawless calendar, and it is mathematically flawless. It's beautiful. It's really a shame that it's not scriptural. When we go back to the 360-day calendar so that prophecy can be fulfilled, where's Enoch? What happened to his calendar? What happened to Zadok, Qumran, Essene calendar with 364 days? Where will they be? What will happen to their calendar? It will crumble because prophecy cannot be fulfilled in a 364-day year. Yahuwah has said so.
How many days is the prophecies? 1200? What's the number again?
1200. 42 months. 3.5 years. When you put all that together, it can only function.
That's the same period. That's the same amount of time.
Yes.
Just mentioned in 3 different ways: months, years, and days. 1260.
Yes.
Yes, but Maria, there are 3 main timelines, but the biggest timeline of all is the 1260. That's the main one. That's the timeline that's talking about Yahuwah's people. So if you want to write this down, 1260 days is the same as 3.5 years, or it can be made you can explain it as 42 months. 42 months of 30 days each. So that's the main timeline. That's the one that there's a 1290 and a 1335. But the 1260 is the main one, and it shows up everywhere. It's everywhere in the scriptures.
And you're saying, because I haven't done the calculations, you're saying that 1260 days only adds up if the year is 360.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
That's
I
that's one
finished.
of the that's one of the reasons that Isaiah has told us. If we want to understand the ending,
You need to know the beginning, yeah.
understand the beginning.
Yeah.
At the beginning was 360. At the ending will be 360.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. I'm ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Calendar is really exciting. When you start looking at calendar, it just goes on
It's
and on and on.
addictive. It's addictive. I can tell you, it's addictive. I'm looking forward for it.
Oh, that's what we found out.
Yeah.
But anyway, just to do a little bit of an announcement here first. This part 2 is really fun. It's going to give us the reason that wave sheaf was given to us in the first place, which a lot of people don't understand. We were never taught it in the 10 years that we kept the lunar calendar. And we're going to finish that last timeline, chart number 7. Or not a timeline, a chart number 7 of the 7 on the manna, so we can know what's happening with the manna. And we're also going to look at the problem when a lot of calendars put wave sheaf on Abib 16 and they have it married to that date. We're going to go through several different examples when what happens when Abib 16 always has wave sheaf, and there's quite a few charts, so just keep tuned because you'll see what's happening in there and what the problems are. And also then near the end, we're going to do a review of that big chart where we see those 2 main important statutes of Joshua are all put together on that one chart. This is the only study that we have found that puts all those statutes together in one example. So Moses had Joshua as his assistant. He was training him. He trained him really good. And when Moses passed away, it was Joshua that led the people, and he stuck to the statutes of the Torah. And so this example where this Shabbat, the weekly Shabbat, was actually the Passover in that year is extremely important. We haven't found another example like it. So just sit back and enjoy. It's really a neat study. Watch for the Etzem. Okay, Tim.
Okay, Kim.
All right. So welcome to our part 2 of 3 as we look at Joshua's first observance of wave sheaf in Canaan. And this is a study from Yah's Covenant Calendar, a teaching approximately in 1451 BC, just after Moses died. If you remember, in part 1, we established when we could find the wave sheaf. And so in this study, we're going to look at the wave sheaf and what it means for us and our salvation. So in this part, Joshua's wave sheaf part 2. Remember, in our last study, we made a lot of assumptions to prove the placement of Passover, to prove the placement of wave sheaf. So in this study, there will be no assumptions. And with wave sheaf and the first Shabbat of unleavened bread, we saw that both fell on Abib 15. So the question is, which one will take priority for us? Or in this, which will take priority, and which feast will be the backbone of our salvation? And we shall see. Joshua's statements have proven that Passover and the weekly Shabbat share the date of Abib 14. And indeed they did. And that unleavened bread Shabbat, as per Torah statute, is always on Abib 15. And we also proved that wave sheaf is placed in that year on Abib 15 as well, and not on Abib 16. So there's more for us to look at, a lot more. And we looked at Leviticus and Numbers. That was in part 1. And also in Joshua, Joshua has more information on the meaning of wave sheaf for us. And in another study, we'll touch on the historical aspects. So we'll have a thorough examination of calendars that are in conflict with what we've seen in Torah. So a little review again. Which festival secures first place? That's the question. Is it Wave Sheaf or is it Unleavened Bread Shabbat? And every feast and festival is of utmost importance, whether an annual Shabbat or not. In Joshua's account, we saw two festivals that share Abib 15. The first Shabbat of unleavened bread, and then the Wave Sheaf festival. And the question is, will Joshua give priority to one of them? Will Joshua make the right choice? And does it matter? Does it matter? We will find that the Wave Sheaf grain is going to hold the clues for us. So to understand the importance of Wave Sheaf and first fruit, it is first helpful to investigate the grain in the land of Canaan. The grain holds clues to help us understand how Wave Sheaf was fulfilled in Yahusha's life. This is the first recorded time of Israel celebrating that full spring festival. Remember, there is no scriptural account for the celebration of the Wave Sheaf festival in the wilderness of those 40 years, 42. Yahuwah promised the Israelites the grain of the land, it would be ready for the harvest upon entering the land of Canaan. But all the grain, whether it was old or new, wheat or barley, it was declared off limits to eat or to use for personal purposes like preparing unleavened bread for Passover. Until it was off limits until after the Wave Sheaf ceremony had been celebrated.
We're going to look at some special instructions for the Wave Sheaf. There is one command that is extremely significant, and it's recorded twice. The terms until, notice the emphasis, until and on this same day. We're going to look at this in detail. These two terms are very, very important for us to understand and to apply. Joshua 5:11 and Leviticus 23:14, they agree. Joshua 5:11, and they ate of the stored grain. Do we remember that verse that said, and you do not eat of the grain until? Well, here it says, and they ate. So by reason that they ate, we know something very big happened. What is it? And they ate of the stored grain of the land on the morrow after the Passover, unleavened bread and roasted grain. When? On this same day. Joshua followed the Torah command. Leviticus 23:14. Here it is. And you do not eat bread or roasted grain or fresh grain until the same day that you have brought an offering to your Elohim, a law forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. So here we see the two verses contrasted. And you do not eat, Joshua, and they ate. Very, very stark difference. That is revealing to us that something huge happened. What is it? When did it happen? The same day, or the self-same day, as what the KJV renders. So look at the verse here on the box on the left. And they did eat of the corn of the land on the morrow after the Passover, unleavened cakes and parched corn in the self-same day. So that word that's been given to us in English, self-same day, we're going to look at it. It's H6106 etzem. There's the word I want you to concentrate on for this study, etzem. It's from H6105, and the definition there is a bone. Look at the definitions. The body, the substance. Substance. That's the base elemental division of this word, a substance. KJV has body, bone, life, and strength. A bone gives strength. On this same day, the primary point we need to pay attention to in the wave sheaf ceremony of the first fruits are the words until the same day, translated from the Hebrew words etzem tze. The main word meanings of etzem are, please pay attention to these, firmness, solidity, bone, as in a basic skeletal structure, and essence and substance. Essence and substance. Where are we going to see this? All definitions link the wave sheaf first fruit ceremony to the self-same day. Note, that's not the self-same date. It's the self-same day. That is day of the week. It is not date of the month. And this will be fulfilled in the antitype, Yahusha being the one that will fulfill it, Joshua being the one that established it. So a question for the self-same day. All definitions link the wave sheaf first fruit ceremony to this self-same day. Again, day of the week, not date of the month, to be fulfilled in the antitype. When Yahusha was hanging in agony, ready to release his breath of life, and he said, "It has been accomplished." Has been. Did that include the future fulfillment of the wave sheaf after his death? Because that had not been fulfilled yet. Was that a future prophecy? Was it a prophetic statement that he uttered there? Was this Yahusha's faith in victory over death? Was he that assured that he would come back after the death he suffered on the tree? What about Yahusha's life? We have often concentrated on the death of Yahusha. That has been a serious focal point, and we do not want to subtract from that. But we're saying here, might we submit a portion of our thoughts to Yahusha's victory of life over death? After Yahusha died, what single event that is commanded to be observed yearly was actually signed, sealed, and forever etched into our salvation for eternity? What event is that? So what about his offering of life that was accepted? Yahusha's death would have no meaning had he not presented himself, note that terminology, had he not presented himself before Yahuwah. It was here that Yahusha's sacrifice was accepted as perfection. What day was that? It's another Melchizedek covenant connection and fulfillment. So what is contained in this life support system? Leviticus 23:14. There's the word until etzem, the very same day. The word is yom. It doesn't give us a date. Until the very same day, when the wave sheaf first fruit presentation and acceptance was fulfilled before Yahuwah within the Melchizedek covenant. This event was the embodiment. It was the skeletal bone structure. Etzem is bone. It was the skeletal bone structure which was and still is the quintessential substance and essence of our salvation. Unless his sacrifice was accepted as the flawless lamb of the first year, unless that was accepted by Yahuwah in the courts of heaven, we would not have salvation. That is the etzem, or the substance and the essence of the first fruit observation So what connects this skeletal bone concept to Yahusha's life support system? Well, the Hebrew word up there, or the Hebrew letter, I should say, is resh. That is the head. Yahusha is the head. And I hope you notice this is a skeleton. It's a bone structure. The skeleton bone structure is what holds the body together. Yahusha alone is salvation's administration center for life. That administration center is the resh, it's the head. Yahusha is the head of our plan of salvation. This factor was finalized through Yahuwah's acceptance of Yahusha, the first fruit, on the festival of the wave sheaf. It was on the first cycle of the week following the seventh-day Sabbath during the Passover festival. This is the very day that Yahusha told Mary, "Do not touch me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father." And if we understand the wave sheaf offerings, they are considered as ascension offerings. And it's for a reason, because Yahusha was ascending. He was ascending at dawn to the Father Yahuwah. He was presenting himself as the first fruit. And because he was and still is the Kohen HaGadol at that time, and still is today, or the high priest in English, only he could present the first fruit offering. That is a statute. And because he was and is the high priest or Kohen HaGadol, only he could present himself as the lamb of the first year, flawless, in the courts of heaven, in the Kodesh place, or in the most holy place, before the Father Yahuwah, to be accepted. If that sacrifice was not accepted, if he had been flawed in the faintest way, we would not have salvation today. That is the importance of the etzem, the bone structure of our salvation. That is the substance and the essence of the plan of salvation, with Yahusha, that was what the scriptures say, was slain from the foundation of the earth. From the very first word of scripture, Bereshit, where the covenant, seen in the Tav of the first word, clarifies all this. Continuing on, Yahusha's skeletal bone distribution system has a purpose. The etzem, or the bone spinal cord central nervous support structure, because the spine is the area that conveys all messages out. This bone spinal cord central nervous support structure is the wave sheaf, is the first fruit festival, and we see this through Joshua. Joshua established this pattern when he entered into Canaan. Now, Joshua is a type of the Messiah. Joshua brought the Hebrew nation into the promised land of Canaan. Yahusha, the antitype or the fulfillment of this establishment, will bring his people into the promised land, the kingdom of Yahuwah, the kingdom of Zion. So we've seen this establishment, this timing of Joshua. He set the pattern. This conveys vital salvational substance through yearly timing and Mashiach character identification. How does it do that? Because if the Mashiach did not fulfill the pattern, the timing, exactly as conveyed and established by Joshua, then we are looking at the wrong Mashiach. If he did not fulfill this on the day after the seventh-day Sabbath within the Feast of Unleavened Bread, we are looking at the wrong Mashiach. This is the bone structure identification of Yahusha HaMashiach. The question is, did he fulfill it properly? Or was he on a date, not a day? This is the question we need to answer. It was done for who? It was done for us. It is the plan of salvation for us. Yahusha's etzem, that's bone, Yahusha's etzem bone notification system, that's the spinal cord, which is in the body of Yahusha, identifies the essence of our salvation through Yahusha's sacrificial acceptance. Wave sheaf first fruit presentation. Done, performed, established, fulfilled on the first cycle after the seventh day Shabbat within the Feast of Unleavened Bread. That would be the 18th day of the month, not the 26th. The ultimate bone distribution system. Etzem directs us to wave sheaf as the backbone, the spinal cord, if you will, the base foundation of Yahusha's plan to bring salvation to his body of people. Yahusha, by dying, then observing the wave sheaf, presented himself to Yahuwah in the courts of heaven as the first fruit of victory over death. Yahuwah accepted Yahusha's monumental sacrifice. If that acceptance had not been done, we would not have salvation. That acceptance is the substance and essence of the plan of our salvation from the foundation of the earth. Kim, can you help me here, please?
Yes, Yahusha was our wave sheaf. He is our Melchizedek. And all the feasts and the festivals are types that have their complete fulfillment in our Messiah as the highest Melchizedek priest. Through the premier type of the wave sheaf festival that was performed in Canaan, through that premier type, the first harvest purposely confirmed the standard for Yahusha as the antitype on his wave sheaf presentation to be the principal first fruit. Now, antitype. What is antitype? It's basically saying Yahusha is canceling out the type. The type was the shadow. So the antitype cancels out the type, and it pointed toward Yahusha. He is our cornerstone. He's the cornerstone. He's the foundation of everything. So he is our Melchizedek. He is the first fruit. So this event looked forward to the time when Yahusha would ascend to receive Yahuwah's announcement of whether or not his blood sacrifice fully paid the requirement of our death penalty. This was a prophecy. This was a prophecy for 1,500 years. It was a looking forward. It was performed, and it was a looking forward to what would happen to their salvation. And the actual cycle of the week, where the wave sheaf type was truly fulfilled by the antitype, was only on that next first cycle of the week, or Sunday, after the crucifixion event. So the timing of resurrection and ascension, we're going to look at these two different events or two different concepts. And maybe many people don't see them as two different things. So don't confuse these two different events. It is Yahusha's resurrection. Yahusha's resurrection was on the weekly Shabbat day. not Sunday. And the next event, Yahusha's ascension, was perfectly timed so that his presence was before Yahuwah as the earthly wave sheaf to be waved heavenward at that early dawn hours of the next day, that first cycle Sunday. And we have a study on the Wednesday crucifixion. A study on the Wednesday crucifixion is crucial if this fact is not recognized yet. So you can always ask. We have more information on that. And it's helpful to chart these things out. You know, charts, they show, it gives you a picture then of what the words are being spoken. And so we'll look at the resurrection ascension during Yahusha's Passover in the midst of the week. So we have the crucifixion, the Passover, in the midst of the week on the fourth cycle there in the red box. And 3 days later, we have the resurrection on the seventh day Sabbath. And wave sheaf is following that Sabbath on the 18th in this year of Yahusha's resurrection. So these two very important events did not occur on the same day. And if wave sheaf is not observed at the exact correct time, then you have a lot of problems. And some of these charts are going to show. We'll look at some of the problems using chart. Okay, so we asked this question earlier. Which was honored first on Abib 15? Was it wave sheaf or unleavened bread? And Joshua's first honor, we saw, was applied to the wave sheaf festival. The wave sheaf festival event, remember, representing Yahusha's ascension during the early pre-sunrise hours of this day at dawn, it honored that first. And then Joshua's second honor was bestowed upon the festival of the first Shabbat of unleavened bread. And all else on Abib 15 pales in comparison.
The first honor, wave sheaf and first fruits. Remember the verse that says, and you do not eat until. That references what is more important. Not what is more important, but what comes first. What takes priority? The wave sheaf and the first fruit had to take priority first before the unleavened bread festival could commence. After the wave sheaf offering of the pre-sunrise hour, that's dawn, the people were released from the command to refrain from eating the yield of the land. We read in 1 Corinthians 15:20, but now is Yahusha risen from the dead and become the first fruits of them that slept. The significance of this wave sheaf prophecy of 1500 years, which is the presentation of the harvest to Yahuwah for acceptance, should draw full attention to the skeletal bone structure of the plan of salvation through Yahuwah's feasts and festivals. Now, I hope you notice this little X that comes up there, and it covers the S on first fruits. Just a little bunny trailer here. Let's have a look. But now is Yahusha risen from the dead and become the first fruits of them that slept. First fruits. Is first fruits plural? Is that correct? Was Yahusha plural? Or is he one? Have a look at what the interlinear scripture analyzer declares. You will see in the brown box there, first fruit. That is not plural. That is singular. So why is that S there? And we look down here at verse 23, first fruit. Again, it's singular. It's not plural. So we just want to point out a little detail here. Why is that S there? Just a little, it might be insignificant, but it is important too. Some Kodesh intricacies. The Kohen HaGadol, or the high priest, was the only identity approved and accepted to present the wave sheaf before Yahuwah. Remember, I mentioned earlier that Yahushua HaMashiach, being the Kohen HaGadol, or the high priest, only he could present himself as the wave sheaf before Yahuwah. And because he was the high priest, and because he still is the high priest, and because he was the wave sheaf, he could not be touched by Mary, because it was Kodesh, it was holy, and only the high priest could handle that wave sheaf after it had been received from the people. Do not touch me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father. Yahusha, as the Kohen HaGadol, presented the wave sheaf before Yahuwah according to Leviticus 23, 10, and 11. Yahusha presented himself as the wave sheaf. Yahusha's presentation consisted of the first cutting of himself, the first cutting. There's several studies that we have in a different series of Joshua that goes into the importance of this first cutting, the timing that razor sharp edge of the sickle touched the grain. That is a timing event. So Yahusha's presentation consisted of the first cutting of himself, the first fruit, and his victory or power over death. We read that in Leviticus 23:10. Yahusha has the power to lay down his life and take it up again. John 10, verses 17 to 18. Note, Hebraically, the word fruit is not seen in Leviticus 23 as wave sheaf. So next, we're going to look at two applications here to be examined. Etzem. There's that word, etzem, bone structure. It is salvation's skeletal structure. Yahusha, the Melchizedek. Melchi is a king, and Zedek is righteousness. Yahusha, the king of righteousness. If he was a king of righteousness and he fulfilled the wave sheaf ceremony outside of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, in opposition to the example set by Joshua, would he still be the king of righteousness? Or would he have messed up, as we can say? Would he be a sinner? So we're looking at the first of two applications. Yahusha, the first fruit. Yahusha, the wave sheaf. The wave sheaf of wheat. It was not barley. That command was for fine flour on the offerings, and only wheat can fulfill fine. Sorry, I'm getting my tongue mixed. Only wheat can fulfill the fine flour requirement. Barley can only accomplish coarse flour. Wheat is the best. And that is what we require. That is what Yahusha required for himself. He wants the best of our offering. Yahusha also likened himself to a grain of wheat. So there's a direct connection here to wheat. Yahusha is the Kohen HaGadol, the high priest under the Melchizedek order today. It is the Melchizedek order that he established at the tree. He is the high priest in every function. He was the high priest that presided over his own sacrifice on the Passover day. Yahusha is the one who sends the Ruach HaKodesh, or his spirit, the Kodesh spirit. Etzem, the skeletal foundation, second of two applications. Yahusha, the Kohen HaGadol, waves his sheaf contribution before Yahuwah. What is it? This wave sheaf consisted in plurality of many individual stalks of wheat. 1 John 4:13. Hereby we know that we dwell in him and he in us, because he hath given us of his spirit, his Ruach HaKodesh. Yahusha presented each individual stalk of wheat within the sheaf, or the people raised at the earthquake, Matthew 27:52, and this was his first fruit offering to Yahuwah. If we recall in the statutes, it says that we are not to present ourselves empty-handed. We must come with something of ourselves to present. Yahusha is no different. He set the example. His sandals, or what he walked out, declares his fulfillment. He also needed a first fruit presentation to Yahuwah of his own. Revelation 5:12. Worthy is the lamb that was slain. Yes, he fulfilled the statutes with absolute perfection and nothing short of it. Yahusha, the first fruit. 1 Corinthians 15:20. But now Messiah has been raised from the dead and has become the first fruit of those having fallen asleep. There are scripture versions that have the correct wording to be in alignment with the Torah commands. Yahusha became the premier first fruit and the principal wave sheaf. He is the one that offered his personal first fruits as one wave sheaf once. That was on the first day after the seventh day Sabbath, on the 18th of the first month in the year Common Era 30. We will learn more about the wave sheaf after considering the events on Abib 16. What? No more manna? Kim, go ahead here.
So Abib 16, no more manna. And this is chart 7 now of our 7. And we'll look at a change of diet in the land of milk and honey. So if we take a look at box 24 here, Abib 14, Passover is performed at even per the Exodus account or statutes there. And it was on a Shabbat. There at even, box 25, we see Abib 15 in Joshua 5:11. First, they celebrated the Wave Sheaf Festival. That was priority. And second, for the unleavened bread, they ate the stored grain of the land on the morrow after the Passover. And in review of box 26 here, we see Leviticus 23:11. And he shall wave the sheaf before Yahuwah for your acceptance on the morrow after the Sabbath. 76:76, the priest waves it. And Leviticus, and in verse 14 there, and you do not eat bread or roasted grain or fresh grain until the same day that you have brought an offering to your Elohim, a law forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. So, no more manna, Joshua 5:12, and the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna any more, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. So here's a question. What's going to happen on Abib 16 then, if there's no more manna? Joshua has definitely confirmed Wave Sheaf is on Abib 15 in this calendar year. That means Wave Sheaf is not married to the Abib 16 date. And take note here that when Wave Sheaf is, when it's permanently placed and observed on Abib 16, it is always a floating festival, as this date floats then through every cycle of the week in over 7-year period. And it only occurs on the first cycle of the week about once every 6 to 7 years. And you know, there's some problems with that. let's take a look. 3 major problems with a floating wave sheaf that's married to Abib 16. So the first problem here, wave sheaf is seldom placed then after the 7676 weekly Shabbat within that Passover week. And we addressed that in our first Joshua Part 1 study. So now we're going to look at another problem. The Abib 16 wave sheaf activities conflict with the resurrection account. This is our second category, and we're going to look at 5 examples of this confliction with an Abib 16 wave sheaf. And then another category, a problem we'll look at is the Omer count. And it's disrupted when you have Abib 16 as the designated date for the wave sheaf. And that's our third category.
Kim, can you allow me to back up one slide? I missed an opportunity to speak here. I
Yes.
want to back up to here. It says here, and the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn of the land. And we know that it says they ate the corn or the old grain of the land on the morrow after the Passover. So that means the manna stopped on Abib 16. Now, remember the command. They were not to eat the grain of the land until they had brought the offering, the wave sheaf offering. Note, Enoch, Zadok, Qumran, Essene, all those calendars, they declare that the wave sheaf occurred on the 26th of the month. The Israelites could not eat the grain of the land from until that was done, until the wave sheaf had been done. There was no more manna from the 16th. What did they eat? How does Enoch, Zadok, and the Essene calendars feed the Israelites during this time from the 16th to the 26th? There's a lot of people hungry. Okay, sorry.
Tim, sorry. That week is supposed to be the unleavened bread week.
This week here is in the unleavened bread week on the 16th when the manna stopped. Yes, on the day after they ate the grain of the land, on the day after the Passover.
Yes. So you're asking with what were they making their unleavened breads if there was no manna and they were not allowed to touch any grain?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's your question. Okay.
That's one of the questions. The other question is, what did they eat? What did they eat at all? They had no manna because the manna stopped, and they were commanded by Yahuwah not to eat the grain of the land. What did they eat?
Did they have any animals? Or
Yes, they had animals.
But they were not allowed to sacrifice those animals and eat them. They had to offer those animals as an offering before they could eat them. So that's another study.
And now they're not able to eat the command of eating unleavened bread for the week of unleavened bread. They are not.
you're not eating animals then?
So there's serious problems with the Enoch, Zadok, Essene, Qumran calendars. Serious problems. You cannot find linear alignment with Scripture. It's a different source. It's a different Messiah. Okay, let's continuing on here. Sorry, Kim, let's bring it to the next slide. It's yours. Thank you.
That's a good point something to point out. Definitely. So the importance of wave sheaf, it is important, and that it follows the weekly Shabbat. So this is our category 2 conflict. We're going to look at Abib 16 placement here, but just remember that we have in the year of Yahusha's crucifixion, the 14th is Passover. In the midst of the week, there's his resurrection on the 7th day Sabbath there, and wave sheaf follows that 7th day Sabbath. And when wave sheaf is celebrated after the weekly Shabbat, The type that is fulfilled in the antitype, the type that's fulfilled in the antitype of Yahusha is this. The resurrection is always on Shabbat, and the ascension, the lifting of the wave sheaf, always follows the resurrection the next day. So on that first cycle. So there will be 5 examples we're going to look at to demonstrate in this category the challenges if wave sheaf is placed only on Aviv 16. And you're going to see a problem. So conflict number 1 here. We'll just look at what happens when you have a first cycle or a Sunday Passover and a Tuesday wave sheaf. So a Sunday Passover, we go all the way to, let's see, the third cycle is the 16th for wave sheaf. We see there's a wave sheaf, and then on the 7th-day Sabbath, on that 20th, is a resurrection. So my question is, you're having a wave sheaf, an ascension, before you even have a resurrection. Abib 16, on that third cycle Tuesday, wave sheaf ascension then is celebrated before the resurrection. So no one will know the wave sheaf is to really occur on the first cycle. Remember, every 7676 Sabbath, it also represents the antitype of Resurrection Day. And so that we have a little X there, it kind of cancels out that third cycle wave sheaf. How can you ascend before you've resurrected? But on the covenant calendar, when Passover falls on that first cycle, we go all the way through the week, passing the 16th there to the 7th-day Sabbath for resurrection. And the day following that on the first cycle is wave sheaf. So in a Sunday Passover year on Yahuwah's covenant calendar, the first cycle wave sheaf ascension is celebrated after 7676 weekly Shabbat according to Torah statutes. Here's conflict number 2. On a Tuesday, you have if Passover is falling out on that third cycle on a Tuesday, if you're recognizing and upholding wave sheaf on the 16th, there are calendars that do this, and you uphold that, and then you go to that 7th-day resurrection. Again, you have a ascension before a resurrection, and that doesn't work. Abib 16 wave sheaf ascension is again celebrated before the resurrection. Abib 16 fails to prophesy the day of Yahusha's actual wave sheaf offering, which was after his resurrection in his year. But on Yahuwah's covenant calendar, if you have a third cycle Passover, you go all the way through that 16th day, you go to the 7th-day Sabbath to remember his resurrection on that 7th-day Sabbath. And then the next day, the day after the 7th-day Sabbath, on that first cycle of the week, you remember his wave sheaf offering, his ascension. It's following the Torah statute pattern. In a Tuesday Passover year, the first cycle wave sheaf ascension on that Sunday, first cycle, it is correctly celebrated after you remember the 7676 weekly Shabbat resurrection, according to the Torah statutes. Okay, let's take a look at another conflict here. There are religions, we'll say, that state that the crucifixion was on a 6th cycle Friday. Passover was on a Friday. Well, you don't have the 3 days and 3 nights in that case, but so they're recognizing a 7th-day resurrection with that mindset, okay, that doctrinal understanding and believing that Yahusha rose after a Friday 6th cycle. And then a wave sheaf ascension is celebrated after resurrection, yes. In a covenant calendar year where Passover, though, is observed on Friday, Abib 16 will follow the weekly 7676 Shabbat, and it is honored properly according to Torah statutes. However, the point is that this cannot endorse the Scripture's 4th cycle as Yahusha's Passover. It represents a false Friday crucifixion. But on Yahuwah's covenant calendar, in a year when Passover falls out on that 6th cycle Friday, the next day is the Sabbath. It's the 7th day to remember his resurrection. We're remembering it. And then the next day after that, on the 1st cycle, is the falling out on a 16th, is the wave sheaf ascension, remembering. There's no changes between this example really and the one just given above. However, be sure to recognize that that 6th cycle Passover does not fulfill the requirements of a Yahusha's messianic prophecy for his year, excuse me, of 3 days and 3 nights. This does occur every 6 to 7 years. It's just not mimicking. It's not a picture of the messianic prophecy for Yahusha in his year of 3 days and 3 nights before his weekly Shabbat resurrection. And conflict number 4, a Wednesday Passover in the midst of the week. And then for those calendars that recognize that 16th wave sheaf, okay, they would recognize that wave sheaf ascension. And then on the 7th day Sabbath, they're recognizing the resurrection. And do you see the problem again? It's wave sheaf falling before the resurrection, an ascension before someone has even resurrected. This is Yahusha's Passion Week, and notice how serious this is when wave sheaf is placed on Abib 16. How can Abib 16 wave sheaf ascension be celebrated before any possible resurrection? This is a serious impossibility. Is that even the proper Messiah? But on Yahuwah's covenant calendar, when we follow Torah statutes, in the midst of the week, 4th cycle, Passover, 3 days and 3 nights will reveal a resurrection on the 7th Sabbath, a remembrance, and this is what occurred in Yahusha's ministry year, his crucifixion, and the day after the resurrection, on the 18th in that year, was the wave sheaf premier offering. The ascension is celebrated after the resurrection. Yahusha's midweek Passover is followed by 3 days and 3 nights in death, terminating with the 7676 Shabbat resurrection. And then his ascension on that 1st cycle wave sheaf celebration. So you see, Abib 16, it pales. In comparison, that Abib 16 wave sheaf in the example above would totally remove the backbone of our salvation. So only this conflict number 4 shows every detail. It follows Torah statutes perfectly in this example. Okay, now we're going to enter into conflict number 5. It involves the Enoch Zadok accounting. Notice Their feast days, they do have Passover falling on a 14th. They're not telling you what day of the week, but they always have it on a Tuesday, a third cycle. And then their unleavened bread is the 15th through the 21st, right there. And then the first fruit wave sheaf offering is on the 26th, outside of the unleavened bread. Okay, so this evidence lists dates for Passover, unleavened bread, and first fruits. And there's nothing here to indicate a proper resurrection timing at all. If you remember, the manna is ending on Abib 16 in that week of unleavened bread. In Joshua's account, the manna ends on Abib 16. So what does Enoch do? What food is offered until the 26th? Because you're not allowed to touch the grain of the land or eat any of that until you offer the wave sheaf. So you have no manna from the 16th to the 26th. How many days is that? Like 10 days? No manna for 10 days. No food for 10 days. No bread for 10 days. No ability to uphold and fulfill the unleavened bread feast. That's a problem. Yeah. And hungry one at that. Okay, so we're going to take a look here. Again, we're addressing another conflict, and it's with the Enoch-Zadok calendars. We'll read through some of this here. So this is taken, note the website there at the bottom. It's found at this website here, Enoch and his history, 33 AD. Okay, so let's just read this a little bit here. According to this article, this particular article says the first month is a pivotal time in Father's New Year. It says it begins by choosing a lamb on the 10th day to be set apart. So we can agree with that. That's true. But now we're going to see some red flags here. In the red box, the first one, Enoch teaches days start at sunrise. Well, that's a problem. Days start at sunrise. We see scripture talks about dawn and boker. And unlike the Jewish calendar, days start at sunset, as the Babylonian calendar in use today show. So we can agree with that the sunset, they got that right. Sunset is not how the day starts. Enoch and the Jewish calendar were used at the time of his death. But events documented by the law of days and festivals can end the confusion between the calendars by reading Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. I agree with that. How about you, Enoch? Zadok, are you reading Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy? And following the statutes? They read clearly how things work. They do. If observed by the Jewish calendar, none of the appointed days can be done as instructed. Okay. The lamb is to be killed. This is an interesting statement. The lamb is to be killed between the evenings about 2 to 4 p.m. of the 14th day. Well, I do have a comment about that. Have you read Josiah's Passover? That's another study, amazing study, but I digress. So let's just continue here. That is the same time Messiah Yahushua was killed in 33 AD. Okay, that's a bold statement. 33 AD, really? Well, there's more studies on that. That's a question that won't be addressed right now. And thus ending all sacrifices for the whole of mankind. Yes. Okay. Now let's look at this next red box. It says, he was in the grave 3 days and 3 nights, the sign of Jonah. Okay, yes. Scripture speaks of that. The ending of the 14th day at twilight to the ending of the 3rd day, the 17th day at twilight. Now, they're not telling you what day that is. Okay, they're not telling you. We're going to chart that out. And then they're saying that on Sabbath the 18th. Okay, now they're saying on Sabbath the 18th, he went to testify to the ones gone before. So there is a difference, and we're going to chart all this out. So we see that this quote talks about 3 days and 3 nights, but there are several other problems also. And the following chart is going to show us why there's a problem here. And then they make the statement there in with the underlined green, the 15th of the month at sunrise is the first day of the festival of unleavened bread. Well, remember, it's dawn. And remember, Joshua's year had wave sheaf and unleavened bread on Abib 15. And then he makes the statement there that on the 26th, in the green box there, on the 26th day of the month is the wave sheaf offering and the beginning of the Feast of Weeks, 50 days or 7 weeks and a day ending on Pentecost Day, the 15th day of the 3rd month, saying they're giving it a date there. And Enoch's wave sheaf on Abib 26 then, with Pentecost on the 15th day of the 3rd month. And that's a problem. So yeah, well, let's chart this out. Charts really do reveal a lot of these conflicts when you chart it all out. So charting out, we'll chart out Enoch's evidence for his Tuesday Passover there, 3rd cycle of the week. Okay, and that's when they start their 3 days and 3 nights right there. 1, 2, 3. And they are saying that he rose right there at the end of the 6th cycle. So with a 7th day resurrection, but we have a problem here with Enoch's calendar. The number 1 or point little 1 there is that the Tuesday Passover has no alignment with the midst of the week as documented in Daniel 9:27. And we see that the resurrection, it's stretched all the way to the Shabbat morning twilight of Abib 18. There it's stretched all the way to that point, just the beginning of that day. Okay, there, and then following that 7676 Sabbath within the week of unleavened bread, that following on the 19th, they do not celebrate a wave sheaf offering. They go all the way through to the following first on the 26th. So first fruits does not follow the weekly Shabbat in the Passover festival week on Enoch's Abib 19. And that conflicts with the pattern, with the antitype of Yahusha. This is a serious problem.
Kim, can I just make a little comment before the slide moves?
Okay.
That stretch, Yahusha laid down his life at the 9th hour on Passover Day. So that would be the 9th hour on the 14th, on the Tuesday. And when you count 3 days and 3 nights or 72 hours, that lands at 3 o'clock on Friday. But they said in the article that he rose at dawn on the 18th. So that's why we're saying they stretched it. So actually the stretch is it's quite a bit of extra time from 3 o'clock in the afternoon until dawn the next morning. What is that, about 15 hours? Why they do that, I'm not really sure. So in this article, they bypass the absolute perfection of a 3 days and 3 nights timeline of 72 hours. They've stretched it way beyond the 72 hours. So that no longer points to a true Messiah either. So that is an important point to watch there from that article. Now there are many varieties. There's different Enoch and Zadok calendars. They all have a few varieties, but that particular one anyway. So thank you, Kim.
Yes, thank you, Charlene. So, so we have a huge counterfeit here with that third cycle Passover right there, and the stretching of the 3 days and the 3 nights right there from the speaking voice of Yahusha saying it is finished. The Abib 26 wave sheaf ascension then is on hold until another 8 days pass. So the third cycle Passover, the 3 days and 3 nights stretched, and then according to Enoch Zadok, they say he rose in the early mornings of that 7th day Shabbat, but then he has to wait and wait and wait for this whole week to pass to arrive at his ascension day on that 26th wave sheaf, according to Enoch and Zadok. And so why Enoch? Why? Enoch says Yahusha must refrain from human touch to not contaminate his pure offering before Abib 26. And I say, really? Really? The first cycle of the week is the correct day, yes, for a wave sheaf. It's just that Enoch is a week late for the antitype event recorded in the Gospels. It's recorded right there for us. So Enoch, Zadok, Essene, you are removing the skeleton structure of our salvation, canceling it right out. That is a serious problem. So as just illustrated, the wave sheaf was never to be celebrated as a floating festival each year because it places the ascension before the resurrection. Remember, this wave sheaf is a prophecy, a yearly prophecy for 1,500 years. This prophecy was rehearsed. It was a type. So they would recognize the true antitype, our Mashiach, our Kohen Hagadol, who was the first fruit offering. And that his antitype, his fulfillment of that, then canceled out the type. Every wave sheaf festival was prophetic of the exact day of the week that Yahusha would represent the wave sheaf antitype that had been rehearsed for ages. The prophecy was fulfilled when Yahusha, as the premier wave sheaf first fruit, was presented before his Father. Remember, he's the Kohen Hagadol. He is the Melchizedek. He presented himself before his Father after he talked with Miriam at the tomb. In John 20, verse 17, he told Mary, "Do not touch me. I have not yet ascended to my Father and to your Father." And he spoke that. And after she left, between that event and the event of the other women, he did present himself as a perfect wave sheaf offering. This is the good news of the wave sheaf offering. He was accepted for our acceptance. He was accepted, and then we are accepted. Wave sheaf statue placement. We've seen this chart before. We can look at this again. If we remember, so in Leviticus 23:6, the requirement states that on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto Yahuwah. So that day right after Passover is the 15th. It is the first day of unleavened bread. It always follows after Abib 14 Passover. And in Leviticus 23:11, and he shall wave the sheaf before Yahuwah for your acceptance on the morrow after the Sabbath, the 7/6, the priest waves it. So the first cycle after the 7676, within the week of unleavened bread, is wave sheaf ceremony. It can be on, if the Shabbat, something Shabbat is after or on a Passover, wave sheaf always follows after that 7th day Shabbat. And in Joshua 5:11, we can take a look here. And they did eat of the old corn of the land on the morrow after the Passover, unleavened cakes and parched corn in the self same day. And so in this year of Joshua's, we saw there were 2 morrows. There was the first cycle wave sheaf ceremony. And then on that same day, Abib 15, it was also the first day of unleavened bread Shabbat. So the wave sheaf gave the permission to eat the grain of the land. And Abib 14, Passover, did fall on the 7th day Shabbat in Joshua's year. And Joshua 5:11, he fulfilled, and those calendar statutes were fulfilled, both fulfilled in absolute perfection, right there for us to understand.
Good work with that chart, Kim. You did really well. Excellent. The highlight of wave sheaf. Every wave sheaf ceremony was a prophecy. I'll read that again. Every wave sheaf ceremony was a prophecy. This is what it meant to be rehearsed for 1500 years. The moment of pre-sunrise light, that's dawn, marks Yahuwah's skeletal bone structure, that's Etzem, the plan for every single person. Then, at that time, Yahusha, as the wave sheaf, the first fruit, would completely fulfill every requirement for the plan, the whole plan of salvation on that day. Etzem, the bone structure, the skeletal bone structure, the foundation of our plan of salvation, slain from the foundation of creation. That is when our death penalty was fully satisfied and recognized through Yahusha, the highest priest of the Melchizedek order, the Kohen HaGadol, today. Does this information illustrate how and why the Wave Sheaf Festival is so important for us? Joshua's Wave Sheaf, Part 3. How shall the correct method for counting the Omer be determined? What is the tradition? Let me say that again. What is the tradition of how the wave sheaf became married to Abib 16? What is that tradition? Who is it connected to? Why was it connected? And who promotes it today? We shall see. And this is the end of part 2. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being with us today. And I hope I can speak for Kim and thanking us also. And shalom to each and every one. I hope it's been a blessing. Thank you.
Great.
Oh, we made it through.
Yeah.
Good job, Kim.
That was fun.
It is.
So informative. It shows us the proper placement for wave sheaf, and then we learned all about what wave sheaf is about and the importance of it.
Lots of detail in there.
Yeah, it was I want to say heavy, but I don't mean it in a negative way. I mean, it was loaded.
Yes.
It's heavy.
Lots to chew on,
Yes.
and over, and every time you can get more and more understanding.
When
The opposite of it.
people say to us, well, is calendar really important? Does it really matter what day you keep the feasts on? Does it really matter? As long as you believe, it's okay. Really? That's not the example that we see in Scripture. I believe, after all these years of working on calendar, I believe that Yahuwah and Yahusha have an accuracy, a precision about them that we as humans cannot comprehend. I believe it's far beyond our comprehension. And I believe that we are only striking a bit of the surface on the accuracy and precision that they have for us.
Yeah. And you would expect it from, our Father, that he would be precise.
Mhm.
He wouldn't
Yes.
approximate anything. If he has a plan, he has a plan, his plan is to the last, detail and point.
Mhm.
Perfect.
Yeah.
He has appointed times. And on those appointed times is when the festivals occur. It's two separate things. People want to do away with the festivals. Well, if they do away with the Passover festival, there's still an appointed time. That day, Abib 14, is still appointed. They can't do away with that. It doesn't matter how hard they try. It's still appointed. And that time does not work with the, say, lunar calendar, where it fluctuates all over the board, where it can go back and forth a month between years. It does not fluctuate. The accuracy, the precision of Yahuwah cannot be overstated. It's incredible.
Mhm.
Yeah. Can you please explain one more time what self-same means? Self-same day. What's a self-same?
We get that from the word etzem.
Yeah.
And that self-same, it's pointing out that the importance of that day. That day is so credibly important. Everything is built within that day. It's the central appointment of the plan of our salvation. Everything operated around that day. They come out of Mitzrayim on that day. The birth of the Hebrew nation, Isaac, was on that exact same day. That is how important this Abib 15 date is. And it's a central day. It's just, I don't know how to express it better. Charlene, can you help me with that?
So self-same means important, central.
Very important.
Mhm.
A focus day, if we will.
And not only that, it was a prophecy, because Yahuwah in the Torah statutes said you cannot eat the grain of the land until you give that wave sheaf offering, and it's on that self-same day. That's the day that you're going to eat the grain of the land. So in this particular study, the self-same day is that day that they can eat the grain of the land, but only after they present the wave sheaf. After they presented the wave sheaf, then they can have the grain, and they can do something with it for their unleavened bread. Now, we don't know over here in our culture what to do with greening grain, but I understand that you can roast it, and it's supposed to be very good. But how they did their unleavened bread, we don't know. We don't have those instructions. But it did say they could eat the grain. Now, the old grain is where they would have made their unleavened bread from. So that was a really good point that Kim brought up, is that that was the first day of unleavened bread, that first Shabbat. So they would have had the old grain to have unleavened bread for all those 7 days. You understand that?
To point out more on Etzem, it's a focal point. It's one of the focal points. It's like we get the 10 commandments, and those are 10 focal points of the whole covenant. That covenant is between Exodus 20 and Exodus 23. Exodus 21 to 23 basically is the fine print behind it, the underruling writings between the 10 focal points. So this wave sheaf day, when it has been, or when the word etzem, bone structure, is describing the wave sheaf day, it's a focal point day, same as Abib 15 when they left Mitzrayim. It's a focal point day. It's the base structure point of the plan of salvation, or points, plural, I should say.
Yeah, I understand. Okay. And okay, after they entered Canaan and the first year fast, and then in the second year we have the second Passover celebrated, and the second unleavened bread week. Can you please explain to me what they were eating the second year, not the first? Were they eating the old grain during the unleavened bread week until the wave sheaf day arrived?
In the second year of Canaan?
The second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. Yes, every year after the first one. Yes,
They would be eating the grain that had been ripened and stored and dried and ready to make unleavened bread cakes.
okay. From the previous
Yes.
from the previous, yeah, okay.
But the sheaf that they presented
Would be the new grain, not ripen yet, not ripe yet.
yes,
That's right.
not
Okay.
matured. Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So we only
And
have
don't
this
forget-
issue with what are we eating only the first year, because they were instructed just the first year, do not touch any grain until the wave sheaf.
And you'll note there's 3 classifications of grain: roasted, and in the bread form, or new and old, I guess is what it was. New and old, and in the bread. So that's your 3 classifications of grain. There is no other type of grain. They are all either roasted, new, or old. And those 3 classifications were out of bounds. You do not touch those.
Mhm.
Yeah,
There's
okay, I understand.
There's also something else to think about. Yahusha's ministry year, and Maria, all of these go into big studies. We're just hitting the high points. But his ministry was only 70 weeks. It wasn't 3.5 years. Okay, so that's important. The Exodus 12 Passover lamb had to be of the first year. That means that lamb had to be between 1 and 2 years old. So Yahusha has to follow that pattern as the antitype. He has to have a ministry of between 1 and 2 years. Well, 70 weeks is what it is. We were taught long time ago that his ministry was 3.5 years. That is not the true Messiah. Okay, so that's one
That
point.
is not correct.
No.
That's the first time I'm hearing this.
Yeah. So anyway, have you ever wondered when Yahusha was, this is in his first year of ministry, okay, that he was feeding 5,000 and 4,000 people? And how come they weren't on the land getting their crops and seeding? How come they could follow him everywhere? And he fed them. And that happened 2 times that is recorded. Well, that year was a 49th year. It was a sabbatical jubilee. That was a year that they didn't have to seed and harvest. It was the 49th year. So every 7th year was a sabbatical year for the land to rest. Well, the
You
first
have calculated that.
Yeah. So just let me get through and then you'll have some questions. So on that 49th year, in the first part of his 70-week ministry, he's feeding the people. And in the 50th year, which is sounded at the Day of Atonement, that's the Jubilees. That's when the Jubilees are sounded at Day of Atonement. At the Day of Atonement, when that trumpet sounds, that begins the Jubilee year. That's the 50th year. Okay. That year also is a sabbatical year. There's no sowing and no reaping. Okay. So Yahusha in the first part of his ministry represents that old grain. Do you understand what I'm saying? But he is also the wheat that gets planted in the fall. And he says, remember the wheat, a kernel of wheat has to fall into the ground and die. And then what? It springs up and has life. So he's that wheat there in the fall that ends up following that type, that example. He dies, he lays down his life, and when he raises, that's brand new crop. That to me is a representation of the greening, the brand new grain. But this is now going to finish out his 70-week ministry, which probably lands around Pentecost. Now, we don't have that study ready yet, okay? But 70-week ministry, it is incredible. So that's how I see, everything was planned from the very beginning that his ministry was going to fall on these 2 years where the people didn't have to be on the land working it and doing it. They were free. They were on holiday for 2 years in a row. And then that 50th year, whatever came up volunteer was their food. It came up volunteer. The 6th year was always a double crop to get them through the 7th year, and then a Jubilee even through 2 years. Really interesting. Lots of comparisons. So I don't know if that opens up the picture for you a little bit, maybe?
A lot. Yes. A lot. And can we also touch on, still, I would like you to say it, why they were not allowed to celebrate wave shift in the wilderness? They had to wait until they reached Promised Land to offer.
Oh, you know the answer to that.
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Yeah, because they were commanded, first of all, there was no grain in the wilderness. That's where they were given manna to eat. And they were commanded that they were not to eat of the grain of the land, and they were not to celebrate first fruits until they went into Canaan. That was a command.
Yeah.
Actually,
what's the significance of that, you think?
Well, the plan was Yahuwah was going to take them into the land of Canaan within 2 years. That was the plan. But they didn't go along with the plan. Remember, he said, you get 12 men, one from each tribe, and you send them into the land of Canaan. I want you to scout it out, and I want you to get the report of what is there, what is waiting for you. And the 12 spies came back, and only 2 of them said, yes, let's go in. And the others said, nope. There's too many people and they're bigger than us and we'll just never be able to make it. And they didn't believe. And because they didn't believe, Yahuwah said, you're going to die in the wilderness. All those new people that were born, they went into the land of Canaan. But only Joshua and Caleb, out of that whole multitude of people over those 40 years, 42 years, went into the land. Only 2. A remnant. Only 8 went into the ark. Only 2 went into the land of Canaan. Only from the original group, only 3 at the image, the golden image in Daniel 3, only 3 went into the fiery furnace. Only Daniel went into the lion's den. We're always looking at a remnant. There's always a remnant. So the remnant will be following the statutes exactly as Yahuwah has instructed. They won't deviate on anything. I don't know if that helps a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they were to celebrate this, for 1,500 years. When Moses gave that command, like Kim said, they celebrated. They knew that the wave sheaf was going to be offered by the Messiah on that first day of the week. They were to remember that. So the Abib 16 wave sheaf that came in later on, and that has detoured one of the most beautiful parts of the plan of salvation. And that's what part 3 is all about. I don't know that that you'll want to have that piece, because that's not really connected with the Zadok calendar so much, but it is part 3 of how the enemy managed to get Wave Sheaf moved to the day after the unleavened bread Shabbat. Remember, we looked at
Yes,
unleavened
that's
bread and the
interesting.
Holy. Yes, see, they place it after the unleavened bread Shabbat, not realizing that the unleavened bread Shabbat is not a 7676 Shabbat. Remember, we looked at Holy Convocation on all those other numbers. Yes, they are Kodesh days, but they are that unleavened bread Shabbat is not a 7676. And people just don't look. We didn't either. We were taught something different for 10 years. We didn't look either. We didn't know that we should be asking this question, which Shabbat is it? Well, I shouldn't say that. We did learn, Tim, and then we switched, but we still didn't have the calendar right. But calendar is a learning journey. It's learning all the way along. But as you learn one piece at a time, it just opens up and it just gets better. And then the pieces start to drop in where they all fit.
Okay.
It's a great
I
journey.
don't have any. Yeah, it is. It is even for me. I don't have any questions for this presentation. I will watch it again. Maybe I'll find more questions.
Yes. So we just wanted to ask you, did you want to go back to that question about Genesis 1:1? And you asked about, what was it, Tim, with the interlinear? What was your question? The plan of salvation from the foundation of the earth. That's what it was. Did you want to see that today? Because we didn't have that slide.
The slide. Yes. Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to make a note here so that we make sure we bring up that slide. Do you have that handy, Tim?
No, I erased it. I didn't think you wanted it.
Well, no, we did want it.
I erased it.
You've erased the slide from where, Tim?
The slide that had I brought up Genesis 1:1 from the interlinear, and I put it on a nice slide, made it look good, expanded it so we could read it easily and look at it.
Because you sent it to me. I can send it to you now.
Oh no, that was from the video. Well, Tim, just bring up the interlinear and maybe you can enlarge it on your computer. Do you know how to enlarge it?
Okay, just hang on. I'm gonna stop the recording.
Okay. That's such a good question, Maria.
Yeah.
Okay, we're talking about the phrase "slain from the foundation of the earth." How is it that Yahushua was slain from the foundation of the earth? Where is the foundation? Well, let's look at Genesis 1:1. When we look here closely, we can see Bereshit is the first word, Bereshit. The first three letters, Bara. In Beit is the first letter, Resh, and Aleph. Beit is in the house, Resh is the head, and Aleph is Elohim, basically. So in the house of Yahuwah, the head created, Yahuwah being the head, did the creation, or Yahusha, which are one and the same with Yahuwah. They created Bara. What did they create? Well, the word sheet, sheen, yod, tav, sheet, is a garment. What was that garment? They created a garment for the earth. That garment is seen in the Tav. It's a garment of righteousness. The garment was created in light. When we look at the Urim and the Thummim on the breastplate of Aharon, we see the Tav, which goes with the Thummim. It is light, it is perfection. The Urim is light. So there was, in this covenant, is perfection in light. So this sheet garment that was created for this earth, which enveloped this earth, is light and perfection. So in the very first word here, we see in the beginning was created light and perfection on this earth. It enveloped this earth. This earth was created to be inhabited. That's what it says in Jeremiah. Created to be inhabited. You cannot have life without light. So this light was created within the Tav. The Tav is a sign, a seal, a signature, and most importantly, a covenant. This is a covenant created for this earth within the very first word of Genesis 1:1. So, what is the depth of this covenant? When you study out a covenant, a serious covenant, which is fashioned something like the ancient suzerain treaty with Abraham, when he cut the sacrifices, and Yahuwah passed between those sacrifices at night, as the flame, as the fiery furnace. That covenant was there was a slaying of the animals, there was a spilling of blood. This is the depth of a covenant, a serious covenant. This Tav here in Bereshit, the very first word in Genesis 1, has that depth of a covenant. There is a requirement for blood, a shedding of life within this Tav covenant that was created for this word, or for this earth at the very beginning, a covenant within the light of perfection. Then we come to this second word. It's a duplication of the first three letters. Bereshit bara. This is a creating event here. He created. Why is there a duplication? Well, one way of looking at this duplication is this sheet garment of light that was created for this earth would have to be redone. There would be a breaking, an elimination of this garment of perfect righteousness that Adam and Eve first inhabited this earth in. This garment was broken. It was broken at the tree of life. This new garment, which would be created, established for this earth, would not contain this light of perfection garment. Adam and Eve lost their light covering. The light blood, as what Adam was, Dom. Dom is blood. Blood is a slowed down frequency of light. So when this sheet garment of light, this covenant was broken, Adam and Eve lost their light covenant, and the frequency slowed down so that this light that encased their bodies was removed. It was taken, it was gone. That covenant was broken. They had to be clothed with animal skins. There was a shedding of blood right from this covenant. That covenant was broken, and the shedding of blood was stated so that Adam and Eve could be covered from their shame. Now we come into this. It says here that Elohim did it. Did you notice it doesn't say Yahuwah did it? It says Elohim. That is another way of stating that it was Yahusha that did the creating, the other form of the Father, Yahuwah himself. Because in the New Testament, in John, it says that Yahusha is Elohim. If you have known me, you have known the Father. We are one. Okay? Then we come to the Aleph Tav. The Aleph Tav. Yahuwah is seen in the Aleph, and the Tav is the covenant. It is also the beginning and the ending. I am the Tav Sorry, I am the Aleph and the Tav. In the Greek, we read the Alpha and the Omega, but in Hebrew, it's the Aleph and the Tav. So, in the beginning, when this covenant for this earth was created in light, in perfection, through the Thummim, and the covenant was broken at this same time, and it was reestablished. It was going to need to be reestablished. That is what we see in the second duplication of Bara. At this time of creation by Elohim, the beginning and the ending, the Aleph and the Tav, was created at the same time. Now, Isaiah has told us 7 times, if we want to know the ending, we must know the beginning. Right here, there's an understanding that we have that the ending was created right here. At the time of this covenant, when it was spoken by Yahuwah, he spoke it and it happened suddenly, we are told in the scripture. The ending, the beginning, which is the Aleph, and the Tav, which is the ending, was created at this instant here in Genesis 1:1. This is one of the reasons why when this covenant here, this covenant of light, of righteousness, most importantly, perfection in righteousness, when this covenant was broken, there was a requirement of blood that had to be shed. Because this covenant was broken by Adam and Eve, somebody had to pay for the breaking of this covenant. Who was it that covered man's sin? Who was it that took man's sin upon himself and gave atonement, at one with between man and Yahuwah? It was Yahusha that took this covenant which had been broken, that required blood to repay for sin. It was Yahusha, slain from the foundation of this covenant, this Tav, right here in Bereshit, slain from the foundation of the earth. That is just a beginning look, a slight depth of look at this word, Bereshit. People have looked at Genesis 1:1 and says, yes, Yahuwah created the heavens and the earth, that's really good. But let's go on to verse 5 because that's where it gets important. Sorry. Verse 1 is a verse all of itself. It is the most important verse of Scripture because this is where it began. This is where the plan of salvation was established, right here in the very first word. In the beginning, the covenant of perfection in light was established right here. Light came first, right here. The Thummim and the Urim are seen in this Tav. The light. The Yahuwah is light. When the Hoshek, I gotta take a drink, I gotta say that properly. When the Hoshek darkness was imposed in verse 2, that Hoshek darkness of contamination, of tohu and bohu, was an assault on these 3 letters, on the Shin, Yod, Tav. It was an assault on this perfection in light. It was another Tav another covenant, another form of covenant that assaulted this perfection. The tohu and bohu, the confusion, the chaos and vacancy was challenged in these 3 letters. In verse 3, when Yahuwah said, he saw this assault happen, and he said, let there be light. The Ruach of Yahuwah was vibrating above the waters. That waters is a euphemism for the seed. So what seed was on the waters? It was the seed of Satan, of confusion, of contamination that was on the waters that had assaulted this sheet garment of righteousness. Then Yahuwah said, I will not accept that. I'm going to send my Ruach. My Ruach is going to vibrate frequency of life, vibrate as much the same as a honeybee vibrates on the flower to get the pollen. So the Ruach was pollinating the waters with the frequency of life, which is Yahuwah himself, seen in these three letters, the frequency of life and perfection. The Ruach was eliminating the assault of Satan's Tohu and Bohu imposition on the waters. When this happened, Yahuwah said, let there be light. In verse 3 we read, and there was light. The character, the perfection of Yahuwah seen in these letters, which is a covenant of light and perfection, prevailed in verse 3, and there was light. We could say this in another way, and the character of Yahuwah eliminated the Tav covenant, the imposing Tav covenant, which is Satan, was eliminated by the Tav covenant life of Yahuwah. So right there in verse 3, when it says, and there was light, that was the culmination of the fight, of the battle, the supernatural battle of light over death. Your salvation was accomplished. The victory was won in verse 3, right there. The victory over good and evil, over light and darkness. So when we come to start our Sabbaths today in darkness, start your Sabbaths at sunset in darkness, that does not correlate, that does not align with verse 3 when it says, and let there be light, because light came first right here in the word sheet. This covenant was a covenant of light. This Tav is the covenant, the sign, the seal, the mark, and the signature of Yahuwah. Light and perfection. Light came first. When you start your Sabbaths in darkness, you are starting your Sabbaths under the name of another Messiah, and it is not the one that spoke creation into existence. Because the Messiah, the Mashiach, Yahushua HaMashiach, the Kohen HaGadol today, is the Mashiach of perfection, of light. That is why, starting in Genesis 1:1, dawn starts the day. Dawn ends with the fruition of the next dawn. The first day ended, the second day had begun, and that pattern continues through creation. Dawn ends the day and begins the next day. It initiates. Dawn to dawn is your everyday 24-hour period. Dawn to dawn is your Sabbath. Dawn to dawn is Yahusha's sandals that he walked out through the Passion Week. When Yahusha observed his calendar of the covenant, that covenant made in Mount Sinai, which was reestablished in Mount Sinai, when Yahusha observed his Passion Week, he observed dawn to dawn, identical to the very beginning right here. Light was established first. The light of Yahusha HaMashiach right here. That is his sign, his seal, and his signature. Genesis 1:1, Bereshit, right here.
Just to make a note here for people who haven't watched the previous presentations, that this slide belongs to the first part of the Joshua presentation. And you mentioned that, but the slide is not on the video, so we're showing it now, and you will explain it again, team.
Mhm. Mhm.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, for this presentation, do we have any